Okay, let's again get started. So client side, we have seen a few attacks. In fact, there are a few more attacks. I don't know how much time we have. I will revisit it if required, but I thought I'll move on to server side attacks now. So let's, much like before, understand a little bit of background on the server side, and then we will see 4 different types of attacks, of which SQL injection is the most interesting attack, and this is a lab specific to this. So this is the server side architecture where essentially the client is going to request the web server. So these requests happen via the GET or POST, and you may give specific information to the server. So if it is a POST, you may actually be filling forms. You also saw in the earlier that non-persistent XSS, there was a search.php question mark and then there is a script. So basically you are saying to PHP, give whatever follows that as an input to the PHP. Okay? So that's, or you could also, so that was a GET request. After question mark there was some text. That text is an input to the PHP. Okay? So that is what server gets. And what the server does is it takes this user input and it passes it to some scripting module. Again, we will see examples of this shortly. And this scripting module is the one that is going to generate. So this may access other scripts, it may access databases, whatever it is. Finally, it is going to generate a HTML document. And this HTML document is dynamically generated. This is not a static document. There are static documents also, where if you are not generating, that gets served automatically. But whenever we invoke scripting, those are dynamically generated documents based on user input. And this document, once it gets to the server is going to return it back to the client. Okay? So this is typically how the server architecture is, and for the scripting module, these names you must have heard of: PHP, Python, so Django Python they say, so that's part of this, Ruby, so all these are scripting modules. You can write the scripts based on that. JavaScript, just again people get confused between JavaScript, PHP or Python. JavaScript predominantly is a client side thing. So the browser will interpret the JavaScript and execute certain things based on what it is saying. PHP is a server side scripting where it will take the user input, it will process that input, generate dynamic HTML whatever content, embed it. It could also generate JavaScript as part of it, but it will embed it as part of the HTML, which gets passed to the client and the client will execute that. Okay, so that's what is happening here. So for example, this is an example of a PHP scripting example, where if you write HTML like this, where it is saying that, so here for example this could be some script. So let me call this script square.php. So there will be some URL /square.php, some question mark, and then there will be some input. So if this is being sent, from this input you are getting this number, so it is saying use the get method. HTML has get and post. Use the get method, whatever number is listed after that, you take it, fill it as part of x, and then square of number is this x into x, so this PHP is the scripting part of it, and the end result of executing the script is a HTML page, that is this. Okay. So basically what the script is doing is it is taking 5 as an input from the user, substituting into it, calculating that calculation, and then generating this HTML. And this HTML will be passed back. So if any user that types this URL with that square.php question, give 5 as an input here, will get back this HTML for the browser to show. Okay. So that's what is happening here. Another aspect on the server side is oftentimes the server through the scripting modules has to access database, because database has the relevant information, and at the same time it is the job of the server, because this is a security course, we do not want this attacker to also get access to the database, because database has lot of sensitive information. So, how do you prevent that access? That also we will see. So, again a little bit of background about databases. I do not know, have you done database courses? Most of you have done. Okay. So, anyway this is a very quick background. So, database, this we are dealing with structured databases, not NoSQL, these are SQL style databases. These databases basically have tables, which you are all aware of. For example, this is a table called students and it is storing some information about the students. And when you are accessing this database, there is a query language. So, SQL is a structured query language which is used to interact with the databases, and this supports many functions like select, insert, update, delete and so on. So, for example, in this, if this was a database and if you put this query which is select star from students where ID is equal to 2, star is a wild card. Basically it is telling give me all the entries for the student who has ID is equal to 2. So, this row will be output if you make this query. Okay. Similarly, here if you say select marks from student where name is equal to Uma, so it is saying give me the marks specific to Uma. Okay. So, this is way you query the database to get whatever results you want. This is relevant for SQL injection. So, when we cover that you need to know this background. So, a table has rows, this is called a record, this is a record, these are columns. Columns correspond to attributes. So, that is what it is saying, and star is a wild card which will mean all attributes in the record. So, that is what it is. Okay. So, with that background, let us look at some of the attacks that are possible on the server side. So, remote file exclusion, local file inclusion, these are not very popular. In fact, it is not easy to do these attacks, but for completeness let me just mention what these are. Oftentimes when you are writing the PHP scripts on the server, you want to include some other files. This is like when you write C code also, you will include some .hs from some other places. So, similar stuff is available in PHP also, where for example, if you want common headers, footers, files based on input, you may want to do something like this. So, basically what this is saying is include header.html is when you are constructing this HTML to pass to the client, include some header information from some HTML, and for example, if this user is asking for a specific file, it is saying get that file .php and include that also as part of this HTML, and similarly include a footer.html. Okay, so, that is basically what this is saying, where this page is an input from the user. If the says page is let us say student is the input, it will include student.php as part of this. Whatever student.php content is there, it will include in this HTML. That is what this is telling. So, naturally if you can see here, there is scope for what this is saying is remote file inclusion, because this input is being dictated by a user, and if this user is malicious, you can include whatever file this user is specifying as part of this PHP, which can be a dangerous thing. Okay. So, let us again see some examples there. So, here for example, this is what a client, which is in this case the attacker, is contacting this server which I am calling as a victim because it is subject to an attack, and index.php is whatever it is invoking the PHP with this, where page is the name and this is the value. So, it is basically telling that include. So, when if you do that, basically this page, it will take this thing and it will take that evil.php from that particular page, and whatever is in that it is going to include here. And if this evilcode.php has some malicious content, that will get put in here. Okay, and it is going to, then the PHP script will execute that PHP. Okay. So, that way you are basically asking basically you are injecting code into the server and asking the server to execute that code. and that can result in, for example, if this evil code is a web shell code. So, there is web shell. Web shell means that web servers, typically system administrators, log onto the web server and do some activity on the server remotely. So, for that, lot of these web servers will come with a web shell code, which gives you the terminal access, like you are seeing in that command line, whatever access, it will give it to them. So, this they will be able to access the web server remotely through a web shell and then execute some commands on the server. Now, if this evil.code happens to be a web shell code and you are asking the PHP to execute it, then you are basically, so for example, if this was the web shell code, the client, which is the attacker, will get a web shell in the browser. Basically, in the browser you basically will see a web shell, and then he can browse the server, he can do CD, whatever, ls, all those things he can do. That way he will get to know more information about the server. This is clear what has happened here? So, this, as I said, is not very common, because whenever you write code, you definitely will not allow execute code hosted on a separate. So, this inclusion of code from some other server, which is evil.com, the server will not contact an outside entity, get the code from there and inject it into the current PHP. This all servers these days will not allow. Whatever files you want have to be on the server. They do not allow you to access some other site and include that code within that. So, this is not very common. So, this brings out to the next thing, which is local file inclusion, where the idea here is you do not want to embed code from some other place, but you want still to be able to access some information that is on the server. So, here, so for example, if you type something like this or you type something like this, you can actually see on the server. So, these are files that are present on the server. You are basically telling again, include this admin-confidential.php script and show me what that content of that whatever. So, basically it will execute that script and generate whatever it is and it will show. So, for example, in this case passwords are stored in here. So, but then as you can see earlier, if you type something like that, it will put password.php and it will not find any file called /etc password.php. Okay. So, in order to avoid adding that PHP, oftentimes you will add this, which is a null character, and it will terminate that string. So, this point I do not know if people have understood. So, let me show here. So, if you see here, this is /etc /password, but then it is adding this .php and it will try to include this file, and there will not be any such file, because the file is only /etc password, it is not /etc password.php. Now, if you want to terminate this, here you have to put that null character, then it will terminate that .php and it will only include /etc password. Now, if you include this file, it will include this file and then it is just a file, it is not a script. So, then you can see the content of what /etc password is. So, this will reveal some password information, which you can then use to crack the passwords and get access to the server. So, this is what this is telling, and especially in this local file inclusion, it can become even more dangerous if the server allows people to upload things. Like lot of websites, you know, you can upload images, you can upload documents, like for example, if you are using any learning management system, if you are students, you upload your assignments on that particular system, right? Now, whenever a website has such a feature, you could potentially upload malicious code yourself. Like for example, in the past, you could upload that shell script or whatever it is, but if it is providing you to upload, you can upload malicious code. And then because, and somehow if you figure out where exactly these things are being uploaded, the path to where you are uploaded, then in this local file inclusion, you can specify the path of where you yourself have uploaded that code. And then it will include your own uploaded malicious code. If it is a web shell, you will again get access to web shell. You do not need to get it from evil.com. You yourself have uploaded it, and in the get input parameter, you are specifying the correct path. So, here again you are just again for context. So, here for example, you will specify the path where all these uploaded files are saved. Then it will include this in the .php, whatever you can eliminate, whatever, if you want a PHP you can do, or you want to eliminate .php, put a null character, it will include whatever you have uploaded into this. Okay? And then again it is a problem because you can launch web shells based on that. So, how do you prevent this? Basically you have to write code carefully on the server where you ensure that user uploaded files are not included in these pages that cause potential damage. So, this is a server side coding practice where maybe that path wherever you are allowing users to upload, the server will not put those as part of PHP. In fact, there will be a check that says if this is the path, do not include any files from there onto the PHP. So, that is the way to you have to code the server PHP scripts carefully. So, moving on to another attack, this is we will spend a bit more time on this. Again, this is also a very popular attack. It is called an SQL injection attack, where the idea is you will use this to access the database. Sometimes you will also use it to authenticate without having access to password. Okay? This all occurs because again same thing, that when you are collecting some input from the user, you are allowing certain things which the user is not supposed to do. So, that is the basic idea here. So, again let us see how things are. This thing may look a little bit complicated, but it is not. So, let me just go step by step. So, this is an example. By the way, this does not have any attack yet, I will get to the attacks later. This is a regular PHP script, okay, where a user, a client has basically in the browser typed this URL, where it is saying visit this host example.com, and within that server, whatever this example.com server, invoke the students.php script and give it a input 2. That is what this is telling, and this is the specific script that is running on the server. So, this is the PHP script. So, where it is saying that this input is being replaced here. So, it becomes id is equal to 2. So, what it is doing is query. So, this PHP script is now accessing the database where it is saying give me the details of the student who has id is equal to 2. So, it will return that row that we have seen earlier. Okay. And then it is saying that whatever this returned, this is the query, actual query, put that returned row in this output. Returned row is a string which is just putting in this output. And then this is to display the query results. It is basically telling echo means just print this table with ID, roll number, name, marks, and then parse this output and mention. So, this row is nothing but fetch this array and put this like this. So, basically what it will do is it will have something like ID, roll number, name, marks, and if this ID is 2, roll number is 173 whatever, name is Akshay, marks is 67. This is what gets displayed, as in it is constructing the HTML like this, and this will get sent back to the user who typed this. So, he basically will see this in the browser. Is it clear what has happened so far? Now, what is this SQL injection is basically if this ID, there you are given ID is equal to 2. If you give some other value in that ID, you can basically do something where you may be able to reveal information which you are not supposed to reveal. So, that is the basic idea. So, to illustrate it, let us say there is a table called teachers, and this table teachers has 4 attributes, which is name, user ID, salary and bank account. So, the database has this table with this data, teachers data, and you want to get hold of this information. It is not revealed to you, but somehow you want to get hold of this information. So, what do you do? So, this is what you are doing. So, remember there is a table called students there is a table called teachers. As an end user, the students.php ideally is supposed to access only the students table. But now by doing something else, I am now going to access the teachers table. That is the basic idea. Okay? So, what am I doing here? My input, this is under my control. I can type whatever I want in ID. Ideally, you would type an ID which is a number for the student. But here I am typing something else. What am I typing? It is ID is equal to null, and then I am saying union select bank account user ID name salary from teachers. Okay, so the end result of this is that this is the command that will get executed based on the PHP script that I have shown earlier. Remember that ID was replaced, where after ID it is going to put this entire thing. And this is something, if you have done databases, you should know. It is basically a union of two select commands. This ID is equal to null means it won't return anything, but because it is a union, this select will get this entire teachers table and it will display. But if you see, the odd thing is it is putting ID, roll number, name, marks, because those are the entries we are using as part of echo. Because the students.php is dealing with students table, so it has, but then the actual values here are corresponding to bank account user ID name and salary from the teachers table. But of course, if you are an attacker, you know how to parse this. You won't go with that this is a roll number. You know that this is the user ID of the teacher, this is the name of the teacher, this is a salary and not marks. Okay, this is clear what has happened here. So, here is yet another attack in the space, where the idea here is you want to bypass authentication. So, basically there is a web server, you are supposed to enter a username and password, and of course only when you enter the correct password it will give you access. If you do not enter the correct password, you can't. But now an attacker wants to log in without knowing the password as someone else. So, he wants to log in maybe as an admin without knowing the admin's password. Okay. Now, how is that done? So, that is what is being shown here. So, here is again the PHP script. As you can see, what it is saying is, it is saying select star from users, where email, you are getting the email from the form. So, whenever you fill username password, that goes as a post request as a form, where username value will have username, or in this case email, and password will have whatever password you have entered. Okay. So, that from the post email field you are filling that email, and from the post password field you are getting the password, but then you are taking a hash of the password, because this is something I do not know whether it was covered. On the server you will not save passwords directly, because if the passwords got breached, you are in trouble. So, you always hash the password. In fact, you use something called salt also there, that also I hope got covered. You use the salted hashed passwords is what gets saved on the server. Okay. So, whenever you do the comparison, whenever a user submits the password, you have to take a hash of it and then compare it with the hash that you have saved in your database. Okay, that is what this is doing. So, it got the password which is the regular password, it took a hash of it, and then that you are putting in this field. So, basically what this is telling is that in the table, wherever this whatever users table, the email has to match this email and the password has to match this hash. If these both match, give the entire row of that particular user to me. That is basically what this is asking, and that output is saved in out, and if it says this out is greater than 0, what this is telling is that it is a valid entry. That means password checked, email checked, then login is successful. But if this out is 0, that means no entry matched, that either email did not match, or if email matched, the password did not match. You are basically going to say access is false and login failed. The script is clear. What has happened? Now, given that this is the script and you want to log in and you do not know what the password is, okay, so you can't really furnish this password, but still given that this is the select command. By the way, how you may be wondering, how do I know that this is the PHP script? Because only when you know that this is the PHP script you can construct the right input to bypass. Oftentimes you may not know, but there are also a lot of cases where of course if you do not quite know, you will guess, you do hit and trial whatever it is and try to know. But you should also be aware that lot of times lot of web servers are also based on open source code. Like I may start a web server, the Drupal, this, that, whatever it is, they are all open source, Nginx, whatever it is. So I could potentially, if I am using open source code to start my web server, then code is open, everyone can see what that code is. Okay, in those cases things are a lot more easier. So this is what an attacker will do. In the email field, the attacker is going to type this, and in the password field he is going to keep it empty because he does not know anything about the password. Okay. Now what is this? So if you look at the previous script here, whatever you have, you have entered, this is the select command where email is whatever you are typing, password script is like that. So with this, basically this is what gets executed. So this is what gets executed. It is basically telling select star from users where email is equal to, so basically this thing has been terminated with this. Okay, and then it came or 1 is equal to 1, and this is a comment. That means after this there are actually 2 of this. This is the comment, and after that comment whatever it has, it does not really matter. You can type random password there also, it may take a hash of it, but the fact that you did this with this as a comment, the SQL engine will interpret this as a comment, it will terminate all that. And now if you see here, it is saying email is this or 1 is equal to 1, 1 is equal to 1 will always be true. Okay, so basically since 1 is always true, the query returns the entire user table, because that is how SQL is. If you give it where email is whatever or 1, this is a true statement, it will return the entire table. Because it returns the entire table, the number of rows will be greater than 0. And because the number of rows is greater than 0, you will say login successful. So you are basically able to log in without having access to the password. Okay, so this is another example. So again, this I have covered. This PHP script you will need to know, but it is possible to know that in open source projects. And oftentimes many databases often store a master table that contains information about all the tables, and somehow if you are able to get this master table access to it, then you know a lot of things about the database. While so far we have done only based on select command, there are delete commands, update commands, in fact update also you will see as part of today's lab. So there are many things, you could delete the entire database itself using the delete command. So how do you defend against these type of attacks? Again the same thing, if you are accepting input from a user, you better sanitize that input. You better be clear that there are no commands as part of the input. So that is what this is telling. Lot of times these things have special characters, like you saw is equal to quotes, in order to terminate comment ke liye there is dash dash and so on. So if it is a message, there is no reason why. If it is an ID, why should there be special characters? You should not allow special characters. Lot of these PHP, I do not know if PHP provides, but Django Python definitely provides lot of frameworks for such kind of input sanitization. So when you are writing server code, you just need to invoke that whatever input message comes, you say Django do this validation and it will do it for you, and if it is not valid, it will say no and you will drop that particular request. So that's how it is done. There is yet another, so that is from the input validation. The other aspect to it is when you are writing the queries itself, that PHP, that SQL, whatever you are writing, there is a way to write where this is called parameterized SQL. So you don't directly put that. In the past you have seen that I have taken directly the user input and password input. You don't write code like that, you write code like this, where what happens is that it will first query whether someone with that username is there or not. If that failed, this query will also fail. So this, if you wrote code like this, the earlier attack would not have been possible, because there when you have queried for that particular user, that email was given blank, right? It would then, this will return there is no such user, in which case this will also fail because there is no such user. Okay, so this is another way which basically this as a username, whatever it is, would have written false and it would not have worked out. There are also tools for automatic detection of SQL injection in, so this is something to keep in mind. I don't know if you have seen this, XKCD has some very nice cartoons. This makes fun of the database, so you can have, you can read it for yourself. One last thing, again I am not going to get into too much detail here, but oftentimes when we are launching attacks, there are servers, and servers has lot of information, the database, credit card information, many things are saved on the server. And oftentimes we keep hearing server got breached, server got hacked. Recently that AIMS server, many things were encrypted, whatever on it. So how are these things done? Somehow you are getting access to the server, and once you have access to the server, then you need root access into the server, and once you have root access, you can do whatever you want. You can encrypt the entire database and ask for money, you can delete the entire database, or you can copy whatever is in the database, credit card information, whatever it is. Okay, so that's the basic idea. Now how do these attacks typically happen, that we will see, but the defense often is that you should always give the server the least privilege that is possible, because even if the server is hacked, you are still somewhat safer. So the way this is done is, you say the server can only access files in this folder, it cannot access anything outside this. Okay, it cannot navigate outside the website's root directory. So this is in some sense a sandboxing type of a thing, but then of course you want root access beyond this. So how is this achieved? So this is not the only method, there are other methods also. Based on what I have covered, I am bringing them all together. If the server has an LFI vulnerability, it will leverage that local file inclusion. Basically it will use that upload facilities to inject a PHP script, which is a web shell script. Once it gets access to the web shell, it can then compile programs. And once it can compile programs, this is what our topic next is, which is called a buffer overflow. When it can compile these programs, there may be vulnerability in that particular program. Okay, if you have that, you will exploit the OS weakness and elevate the privileges to the root account. This is what is coming up next. So I'll spend a little bit of time on that. And once you have a web shell with non-root access, by compiling a vulnerable program, you will get root access. And once you have root access, the entire server is under your control. You can do whatever you want with it. Okay, so that's how things are done. So again, the solution for this is least privilege, and you should always check for what vulnerabilities the server has and accordingly handle them. So I think this is what we have seen. Basically many of these things are due to input validation. So input validation is extremely important, be it client side or be it server side. And whenever you are administrating server, these two things are extremely important to ensure. So that is, give least privilege and ensure that the server is always up to date. Okay, so that's the idea here.